Welcome to our Thailand Asia News and Travels Media Group news broadcast. If you could like and subscribe, well, that would be amazing. Thank you so much. Phuket. The name itself conjured images of paradise. Pristine beaches, turquoise waters, lush jungles. James Swaine, a young Brit with a thirst for adventure, felt the familiar thrill of anticipation as his plane touched down at Phuket International Airport. Weeks of planning, of dreaming had culminated in this moment. He was finally here. Stepping off the plane, a wave of humid air washed over him, thick with the scent of frangipani and salt spray. He smiled, feeling the weight of everyday life lift from his shoulders. The airport bustled with activity, a chaotic symphony of languages and smells. James joined the queue for immigration, his excitement bubbling over. He couldn't wait to explore this vibrant corner of the world, to lose himself in the exotic beauty of Thailand. He had heard stories, of course, cautionary tales of scams and dangers lurking beneath the surface of paradise. But James, ever the optimist, brushed them aside. He was streetwise, he assured himself nothing could spoil this trip. His passport, a little battered from countless adventures, was stamped with a thud. He was in. A surge of relief, of pure exhilaration coursed through him as he made his way towards the baggage claim. He pictured himself sipping cocktails on a sun-drenched beach, exploring ancient temples and immersing himself in the local culture. Little did he know, fate had a cruel twist in store. Cocaine. The word echoed in James's ears, each syllable a hammer blow to his sanity. His passport, his ticket to paradise, was now a one-way pass to a nightmare. Panic surged through him, hot and suffocating. He stammered, trying to explain, to make sense of the incomprehensible. It was a mistake, it had to be. He had never touched the stuff, never would. The officers, their faces impassive, were unmoved by his pleas. They spoke in clipped tones, their words a foreign tongue despite being English. His backpack, hastily grabbed from the carousel, lay open at their feet, its contents scattered across the polished floor. Shame washed over him as curious onlookers began to gather, their whispers like venomous snakes slithering through the air. He was manhandled into a side room, the air thick with antiseptic and fear. The reality of his situation slammed into him, stealing his breath. This wasn't happening. It was a bad dream, a cruel joke. He would wake up any minute safe in his own bed. But the cold steel of the chair he was pushed onto told a different story. The interrogation was a blur. Broken English met with frantic denials. Accusations were flung like daggers, each one piercing his fragile hope. He was shown a small bag of white powder, the alleged poison that had been planted in his passport. The sight of it turned his stomach. He was innocent, he screamed, his voice raw with desperation. But his words were lost in translation, drowned out by the deafening roar of his own terror. The slam of the cell door echoed the death knell of his freedom. Gone were the sun-drenched beaches, the vibrant markets, the promise of adventure. In their place, a stark, unforgiving reality. He was a prisoner in a foreign land, facing charges that could shatter his life. The weight of his situation pressed down on him, suffocating him in its intensity. The cell was small, airless, the stench of sweat and despair clinging to the walls like a shroud. He shared the cramped space with several other men, their faces etched with a mixture of resignation and despair. The language barrier, once a minor inconvenience, now felt like an insurmountable wall, isolating him further in his misery. Days bled into nights, each one an eternity. Sleep, when it came, offered little respite, haunted by nightmares of prison bars and courtroom dramas. He thought of his family, their faces etched with worry, their voices filled with a fear that mirrored his own. The thought of their pain fueled his own, a constant ache in his chest. He clung to the hope that the truth would prevail, that the authorities would see through the fabrication and recognize his innocence. But as the days turned into weeks, that hope began to dwindle, flickering like a candle in the wind. The Thai legal system, he was learning, was a labyrinthine maze, its workings shrouded in mystery and rumor. The clang of metal on metal announced the arrival of another grueling day. The prison routine, once alien and terrifying, had become a monotonous reality. Every action, from the moment he woke to the moment he was herded back into his cell, was dictated by unseen forces. He was a cog in a machine, stripped of his individuality, his humanity. The food, if it could be called that, was barely edible, a bland mush that did little to quell the constant gnawing hunger. He lost weight, his clothes hanging loosely on his once athletic frame. The tropical heat, once a welcome embrace, now felt like a punishment, amplifying the stench and the misery. He witnessed things, heard things, that would forever be etched into his memory. Acts of desperation, of unspeakable cruelty, played out within the confines of those walls. He learned to harden himself, to build walls around his emotions, to survive. But beneath the surface, the fear, the anger, the sheer terror of it all continued to simmer. He clung to the hope that the British embassy would come to his rescue, that they would cut through the red tape and secure his release. But their visits were infrequent, their reassurances tinged with a helplessness that did little to ease his growing despair. Amidst the despair, a glimmer of hope emerged. A lawyer, recommended by a fellow inmate, agreed to take on his case. He was a gruff, no-nonsense man, his eyes betraying a weary cynicism born from years of navigating the murky waters of the Thai legal system. But beneath the rough exterior, James sensed a glimmer of empathy, a flicker of belief in his innocence. The lawyer, Mr. Chai, explained the situation with a blunt honesty that was both terrifying and reassuring. The evidence against James was circumstantial but damning. The police had a strong case, but it wasn't insurmountable. There were avenues they could explore, witnesses to track down, inconsistencies in the prosecution's narrative to expose. James clung to Mr. Chai's words like a lifeline. He threw himself into assisting with his own defense, meticulously recounting every detail of his journey, every interaction, every fleeting moment that could help prove his innocence. He wrote letters, made phone calls, desperate to gather any shred of evidence that could set him free. The wheels of justice turned slowly, agonizingly so. Weeks turned into months, and still, he remained imprisoned. His hopes soared with each court appearance, only to be dashed against the rocks of bureaucratic indifference. Yet, he refused to give up. He had to believe that the truth would prevail, that justice, however delayed, would ultimately be served. The harsh reality of his situation settled upon him like a shroud. The carefree young man who had stepped off the plane just months ago, his head filled with dreams of adventure, was gone. In his place stood a hardened, wearier version, scarred by the ordeal but not broken. He had looked into the abyss, had stared into the face of his own mortality, and had emerged, forever changed. He thought of the countless others who had endured similar nightmares, their lives shattered by accusations, their voices silenced by a system that seemed designed to punish rather than protect. He had been naive, he realized, blinded by his own privilege, his own belief in the inherent goodness of the world. He had learned the hard way that paradise, like any other destination, had its dark underbelly, its hidden dangers lurking beneath the surface. The outcome of his case remained uncertain. Would he be acquitted, his name cleared, his life allowed to resume its course? Or would he be condemned, another innocent sacrificed on the altar of a flawed justice system? Only time would tell, but one thing was certain. He would never forget this experience, the fear, the despair, the profound sense of injustice. It had been a brutal awakening, a stark reminder of the fragility of freedom, the precarious nature of justice. And it had instilled in him a profound empathy for those who found themselves ensnared in the clutches of a system that seemed designed to break rather than rehabilitate. This was one of today's headlines in Thailand. Check back tomorrow for more news and updates.